Okay, so we've got our basic structures of the kidney down. Now we're going to learn about some microscopic structures. First, we're going to talk about the structures of blood flow, how the blood flows through the kidney. All right, this looks terrifying, frankly, and at first glance it is, but it's actually quite simple. Okay, it's not simple. It makes sense. And it's actually only half as bad as it looks because, of course, the arteries and the veins have the same names. God bless them. So we've got the renal artery bringing blood into the kidney. That's going to branch into two segmental arteries. Those segmental arteries are then going to branch into interlobar arteries. The interlobar arteries are going to go, wait for it, hang on, ready? Between the lobes. Right? I know it's what their name means. Okay, so they go between the lobes, right? Up these columns. They then branch into arcuate arteries. And you remember, of course, that arcuate means arc-shaped. So these are going to arch around the top of the pyramid. They also, you notice, anastomose up here. They then branch off into little interlobular arteries, which go between the lobules. Oh my God, how cool is that? Okay, you're like, I didn't know there were lobules. Oh yeah, there are lobules. Hang on, I'll get to those. Okay, so lobes, little lobules in between, inside them. All right, so we got lobar arteries, interlobar, interlobular. Don't confuse those. Now, from the interlobular arteries, we're going to zoom in on this section right here. Got the arcuate artery here, the interlobular artery here, and it's going to branch off an afferent arterial. Okay, you remember afferent means arrive. So the afferent arterial is going to bring blood into this little ball of capillaries called the glomerulus. The glomerulus is a little ball of fenestrated capillaries, and the blood plasma is going to filter out of the glomerulus and then go through all of these tan things, which are tubules, which is the subject of the next video. From the glomerulus, the blood is going to flow through an efferent arterial. Remember, efferent means exit. Now you're thinking, hang on, I thought you said these were capillaries. Doesn't blood flow out of a capillary through a venule? Normally, yes. But in this case, filtration is happening, but gas exchange is not. So this does not involve gas exchange. Therefore, we're not in the venous system yet. This efferent arterial is then going to carry blood to the cortex, and there are going to be two different branches here. One is going to go around the tubules, and it's called the peritubular capillaries. The other is going to go down into the medulla, kind of straight down, straight back up with these little connections in between those, and that is called the vasa recta. You remember recta means straight. These are literally the straight vessels. They're going to go down, come back up. Now notice we have blue tubes. Now we have done gas exchange in the cortex and the medulla. Now we are in the veins, and we have a venule that is going to carry the blood to the interlobular vein. Now from there, life is simple because everything has the same name. We got the interlobular veins. They fuse together to make an arcuate vein. The arcuate veins flow into interlobar veins. The only difference we have here is there's no segmental veins. The interlobar veins, you can see, individually fuse together. They don't fuse into big veins before they get to the renal vein. So the interlobar veins drain directly into the renal vein and out back to the inferior vena cava. Okay? So it looks really scary, but when you break it down, this diagram is pretty simple, makes sense. All right, so let's talk about some of the other stuff that's going on here. So this wackadoodle looking thing here and this wackadoodle looking thing here is called a nephron. The nephron is the part of the kidney, this system of tubes that is actually doing the filtration. It's tubes with blood vessels running around them so that water and ions can be very easily moved from the blood vessels into the tubules and then back into the blood vessels if it needs to be. It includes this thing, which is the renal corpuscle, which we will come back to in a moment. Oh, here it is. All right, so here's a zoomed in on that little renal corpuscle, which is this thing here, which is that thing there and that little thing there. Okay, renal corpuscle is very tiny. The inside of it is the glomerulus. I know it looks funky. It's wrapped in some special cells that we're going to talk about in a minute. The glomerulus has a little space around it, and then around that space is the glomerular capsule. The glomerular capsule and the glomerulus together make up the renal corpuscle. Okay, so the corpuscle is the whole thing. This layer is the capsule, this is the glomerulus. Okay, so the afferent arterial brings blood into the glomerulus. The blood passes through the glomerulus, blood plasma filters out into this space, and then the blood continues to flow out the efferent arterial. Notice that the efferent arterial is narrower than the afferent arterial. That difference means that not all of the blood that went into the glomerulus can flow out. There's literally not enough space. So some of the plasma leaks out through the holes in the fenestrated capillaries into this space. Now, only a little bit of the plasma. It's only about 10%. Okay, it's not all of the plasma, just a little bit. That then is called filtrate, and it's going to proceed through the tubules. This is a really cool diagram showing all of the blood vessels through the kidneys. You can see how they branch and branch and branch, make this weird kidney shape. And then this is zoomed in on first a bunch of renal corpuscles, specifically the glomeruli, and then this is an individual glomerulus. Isn't that cool? That's so neat. Okay, now the glomerular capillaries, remember, are fenestrated capillaries. They've got little holes in the walls. They are wrapped in these special cells called podocytes. Pod, you remember, means foot, cyte means cell. So these are little cells that make feet. Their feet are called pedicels. And they are these little extensions like this. They stretch out and they wrap around the capillaries, interlocking around the capillaries to basically create a second layer of filtration. So for things to get from the blood into the glomerular capsule, they actually have to go through these holes and then through this layer of pedicels. That whole process is called glomerular filtration, and the fluid produced is called filtrate. Okay? If this looks like the astrocytes, the way they make the blood-brain barrier in the brain, it is. It's exactly the same kind of thing. Different cells, slightly different structures, but the same kind of double layer of filtration. In this case, it's going to allow plenty of water, ions, and very, very small proteins to leave the blood. It's not going to allow glucose. Well, actually, the glucose is going to flow out with the filtration. It will get pumped back into the blood because you're not supposed to lose glucose in your blood. It's not going to allow large proteins. Your body spends a lot of energy making those large proteins, so you don't want to lose them in your urine. The only time you might have protein in the urine is as a result of tissue damage or trauma. Sometimes people actually get protein in their urine after a really, really hard workout. Hard workouts actually damage some of your muscle tissue, which has to be rebuilt. Sometimes there are some proteins that get released as in your urine as a part of that. All right, so this is a model we're going to be talking about a lot. This is called our kidney board. So here's the whole kidney cross-section. Okay, so you can see the minor calyx, the papilla, the major calyx, the renal pelvis, the ureter, the renal artery, renal vein. Okay, now this, we took a section of a renal lobe, we get this. This is a renal lobe. And you see it's got a renal lobar artery and vein on one side, and they sectioned it so we don't see the one on the other side. And then this is the renal corpuscle, and this is the cross section through the capsule so that we can see the glomerulus, the afferent and efferent arterial, and all the structures therein. Okay, so we're going to come back to this model a couple of times just to orient you. There you go. All right, so this is the kidney. So we already went over renal artery and vein. Here's the segmental artery. Sorry, that's not actually a segmental vein. That's an interlobar vein. Here's the interlobar artery and vein. Here's the arcuate artery and vein, and then we're going to zoom in to the renal lobe. Here's the arcuate artery and vein branching into the interlobular artery. Now, there isn't a vein coming down along with it. They didn't show it here so it didn't get too complicated and confused. That branches off to an afferent arterial that goes to the glomerulus inside the renal corpuscle, to the efferent arterial, to the peritubular capillaries, and then to the vasa recta. We also have a branch to the vasa recta, going down, coming back up through the venule to the arcuate vein or to the interlobular vein. Okay? Here's the glomerulus. Here's the afferent arterial and the efferent arterial. Notice that the afferent arterial is wrapped in smooth muscle. It also has this wackadoodle group of cells on it that we will come back to later. And then in the glomerulus here, what they're showing is this side is the fenestrated capillaries. You can see those little dots. Those are actually the holes, the pores in the capillaries. This side, they're showing the podocytes with their little pedicel extensions wrapping around those capillaries. Then this is the glomerular capsule. All right, so that's the blood flow. Now on the next video, we're going to talk about the flow of filtrate through the tubules and how the urine is actually created.